happened, gosh, I don't know, late November. And the employee that she's backfilling is due to return on Monday, so,
Oh, geez,
you know,
that was my next question.
yeah, a week from today. So the period of employment isn't very long. It's, but, she interviewed well. Who knows? Sometimes when we have temporary employees like that and we have a chance to meet them and see how they work, see that they show up on time and their demeanor is good, sometimes in the past, in some cases, that has led to a permanent position, but it would certainly be premature with this person to say that.
I would say in most cases, we have a temporary employee, we end up hiring.
Sometimes.
We've
Yeah.
had a couple that were bad, but for the most part.
Well, we've had some that weren't bad, but they got jobs elsewhere before.
Generally, we try and hire
Right.
most of the good people.
Absolutely.
Very rarely do we get a dud,
Yep,
but we have had that.
that's right. So, with that being said, is there a motion?
I would make the motion to hire this temporary employee whose name I don't even think I heard, but,
It's right in your board package,
Okay.
Urgenti, right there.
sorry. I should have pulled that packet out. Mrs. Lisa Urgenti
Urgenti,
as a temporary employee in assessing at the rate of $12.50 an hour, no benefits for a maximum of $200.
all right, is there support?
Thank you.
Support.
All right, support by Mr. Badkins. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. All right, next, board members, at the February 8th, 2016 regular board meeting, the Board of Trustees approved the temporary assignment of some of the building official responsibilities to Mr. Brent Condon, and that was an arrangement that would last through roughly the end of this month. I think the end of a pay period is what I chose, which was December 21st of 2016. From the time of February until now, Mr. Condon has performed in that position very well. During that period, he's taken several courses to expand his knowledge. He's worked through the process with the state to obtain the official designation of building official through the state of Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. The temporary assignment will expire in 10 days, as I have it listed. I'm recommending that, based on his performance, that we offer Mr. Brent Condon the position of building official and ordinance enforcement officer in the GELC bargaining unit at a starting salary of $65,520 plus the associated benefits.
So move, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there support?
Support.
All right. Discussion board.
Yes, I see on here that the next item is for building inspector. Who is going to do ordinance?
That's a good question. Yep.
So-
So what we have historically done is this. Little deceiving, because I know someone in another bargaining unit had asked, well, wait a minute, why is he doing ordinance enforcement officer? This building official and ordinance enforcement officer first is a title to describe a position within the GELC bargaining unit where the individual in this position not only provides the role of building official, but they also oversee ordinance enforcement. Mr. Condon's done that for several years, working for the township, so it's only natural that he might oversee that position. We have historically had two employment scenarios in the building department. We've had a building inspector, and then we've had, parallel to that, an ordinance enforcement officer. I'm gonna botch it, but I'm gonna tell you from my recollection, the difference in wage between those two positions is something like $1,800 a year. So, I think maybe 2 hires ago, we made the decision that instead of hiring an ordinance enforcement officer, for $1,800 more, the person can do inspection, they can back up or backfill when our building inspector might be on vacation or out on an extended illness, or if there happens to be an exceptional flurry of work for a period of time. So basically, instead of just hiring an ordinance enforcement officer, by hiring someone who's a building inspector, we have the ability then to assign a greater amount of tasks for
I recall that
$1,800.
very well, and I believe it was Mr. Condon. But
And
that
before that,
said,
Mr.
that
Stanicky.
said, there were two members, Mr. Batanti replaced one of them, and Mr. Tominello was the other, that were adamant that he was gonna be an ordinance officer
Right.
primarily. Do you remember that, Larry?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so that's where I'm going here. I believe that if we hire Mr. Condon, he's gotta wear two hats. He's not gonna sit in the office all day. I want him to do inspections when there's an overflow. We have
Absolutely.
one inspector, so I see no reason to hire another inspector. I wanna hire an ordinance officer only. We've been without ordinance for well over a year.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. The point is let me
We
back
can
up.
discuss that in the
Yeah,
next item
right.
now.
Yeah,
That-
yeah.
We're
So
getting
that's-
into the next
I'm
agenda.
only reason I bring it up prematurely
too
is
much
because
in the
I want it
weeds.
understood that from my perspective, I inspect him to take the overflow
Sure.
for, which I believe he's done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, and that's throughout this summer has continued to do, you know, so. Maybe we talk about that as the next agenda item.
Not that I want to interrupt, but we're getting in the weeds
That's
on
all
the
right.
next
Yep,
agenda.
it's okay. It's
Pretty
all right.
deep.
Yeah, all right, it's all right, no problem. On this item, is there further discussion?
Yes, I have something to say.
Okay,
So I just want to preface, I like Mr. Condon. I always have. I don't have a problem with Mr. Condon as a person, as somebody that you can talk to, his personality, anything. But like I've said previously, when we originally did this, we had several people who were much more qualified for this job that were previous building inspectors and
Building
had experience as building official. But to go from, and I've said this, I personally think that we hired Mr. Condon as an ordinance officer 3 years ago, did ordinance, did a couple of inspections. Quite honestly, I think that to borrow Judge Judy, needs to percolate a little bit more to get more experience to be a building official. And I don't think, from my conversations with people, things aren't as rosy as everybody might think. But that's not, most of that is related to just not having the experience on the job of a building inspector or building official who's been working for 5, 10, 15 years in that position. It's just a lack of that experience, not the book knowledge. When I was in auditing class, for example, they say, all right, here's the book, here's how to audit. Yeah, don't really, for the test, you have to, do this book, but this is the way we really do it in the real world. But you have to know it this way for the test. And I think that, having that experience, whether you're a builder and then you go into an inspector and then to the building official position, I just think that we have other choices that have much more experience. And it's not to say that I don't dislike Mr. Condon. I certainly do like Mr. Condon. And I'm more than happy, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, I'd be more than happy. And I've said this before at this board, when there's some more experience, and I will just leave it at that. But I don't want anybody to think that I do not like Mr. Condon.
And I concur with everything Mr. York has said. In addition, I've known Brent and his mother and his brother and his deceased father for over 20 years. And he is a fine young man. But I agree, I don't think he has the experience. But I can see that he's probably going to be voted in here. So what I want to see is an ordinance officer only to replace what he was hired to do.
Mr. Supervisor, in anticipation of this discussion, I went out and talked to several people in the community. I talked to 2 builders, I talked to residents to get a gauge on Mr. Condon's performance. And I'll summarize some of the comments that I got back. That he is firm but fair, that he's knowledgeable, that he's responsive, he uses common sense. From the builders, these are 2 builders who work in multiple communities, I specifically asked them how Mr. Condon compared to other building officials that they encounter in their other work. They both said that he compared favorably to those other building officials. I further spoke to the building official from Sterling Heights, who's a resident of Harrison Township. And he went on to say that he felt that Mr. Condon was qualified to do the job and that he was a good choice. He also said, to be fair, that Mr. Condon had some things to learn, but don't we all? The last person I spoke to was Mr. Dave Axtell from our own township offices here. I respect his opinion immensely. Mr. Axtell told me that he was completely confident that Mr. Condon could do the job. So I would not make that motion or support that motion without those kind of,
Background.
without that background, but I did the work and I'm comfortable with, that selection.
Yeah, and I know that, I certainly wouldn't say several. To me, several is a big number. We had 2 other applicants that we interviewed at the time that we
There were
interviewed.
4 applicants, I believe.
Well, 2 that qualified that we
I
actually.
don't wanna get into an argument, I just made my statement.
You know, Mr. York, I allowed you to speak at length
I
about
don't
the
wanna
subject.
get you in an argument.
Good, so then allow me to make my comments without interrupting me, and that would probably be best. So we did interview 2
Right,
other.
with guys that had 10, 20 years' experience.
So we did interview 2 other individuals, and while they may have had more experience, we've certainly experienced where experience in and of itself isn't the only judge of an individual or their character or their ability to do the job. And amongst the various jobs within the township, the role of building official is one of those positions where you interface with a lot of different people, from homeowners who may have a lack of knowledge, from individuals who are frustrated because they've been called out for doing work without a permit. You deal with folks in various stages. Everybody's got an axe to grind or their own special angle. And I think most of all, one of the most important characteristics isn't necessarily knowing the very answer to every little detailed question from 20 years of experience. 20 years of experience doesn't necessarily give the person the kind of personality and demeanor that's necessary to deal with all of these people. And I think that's what Mr. Condon brings most to the table. And it's similar to Mr. Axtell. We as a board sat here perhaps 4 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and we had a need to find someone to run the water and sewer department. Mr. Axtell had practically no office or engineering experience, but he had a lot of field experience. But what he had more than anything else was real-world experience in working with people. And that decision to promote someone not necessarily strictly based on their years of experience, but on the total individual, has proven itself to be definitely worthwhile, and I believe the same thing is applicable here.
Mr. Supervisor, a couple things I forgot to mention, now that you're talking. And everybody that I spoke to mentioned that Mr. Condon used a great deal of common sense, and that they complimented the way the department ran and felt that it was a reflection on the way Mr. Condon represents himself. And it's not to say that they, you know, under Mr. Maples, they did a good job as well. They were comparing the tone and the way the department worked as the way it might have worked several years back. So I think I need to mention that also.
Mr. Supervisor, I got one thing. I believe we received the packet, on Wednesday around 9:16. On my lunch hour, I went through the packet, and noticed that this was on the agenda. So I, took the liberty of coming down and sitting down with Brent on Wednesday. Closed his door, we had some conversations that, I feel very well after that conversation of supporting this motion.
Well, I vocalized that I'm against this because of inexperience. I have some respect for Mr. Bertanti. If he's interviewed professionals in the field and they feel that he's gotten up to speed, I haven't really had much interaction with Mr. Condon since the first of the year. So I think I'm changing my mind and giving the young man a chance. But nevertheless, I still want him to do inspections as well as be the ordinance officer.
Sure.
It's probably a long-standing tradition of this job, and different than other communities of similar size, where our building officials in the field most days as opposed to in the office.
He shouldn't be doing all the ordinance, that's what the next item is.
No,
Well, we'll
The
talk.
building official needs to
I
be
didn't
in
say
the
ordinance,
office
I said inspection, did
To
I?
take care of, you said ordinance.
I'm sorry.
I think
I'm
his
sorry.
point is that
I'm
he
sorry, I
should,
meant-
he should free up the.
If I said
Our
ordinance, I
building
No, no, you
retract
said
that.
inspections.
Yeah, I
You
thought
said
I-
inspections, I understood.
I don't want building official going out for ordinance.
No,
Right.
I didn't say ordinance.
Unless
I
need
mean,
be.
personally, I can say the biggest compliment that I can give is the amount of people that we see at Mr. York's counter, from across, we see him across the way from the clerk's office. There's been times in the past, where you heard nothing but complaints about the building department and their difficulty in dealing with the building department as they're sitting there waiting in line to pay their bills, or when they're, called into our office gets to is usually the main switchboard for the township, so we receive a lot of those phone calls, so we hear a lot of those issues. I can tell you the volume of the complaints that we hear and stuff that we get, you know, people are pretty frank sometimes when they don't think they're talking to the building department, they tell us, and you know, that has dropped precipitously, just from that experience. I think is one way to judge, you know, when people are standing out there and they don't really think you can hear them, but they're, you know, complaining, but you don't hear that as much anymore.
Well, no, they get mad for a specific reason, because they go over there and they wanna put the water, for example, a water tank in this spot A, and the building official says, nope, you gotta put it over.
Right,
In
so-
spot D, that's where most of those complaints come in, and.
But I can tell you the complaints
I-
used to be, man, that person was rude, not they told me to put a water heater
understand.
someplace different. I don't hear, man, that guy was rude. I hear, man, he told me to put the water heater in a different place. That, you know, that doesn't go away. But it's never about a person or a personality.
I understand.
Supervisor, I talked to one of the, major builders in the township, probably different, I'm sure different than the, builders that Mr. Patanti spoke to. They talked about good work ethic, knowledge of the ordinances and building code, a straight shooter. He was, also talked about as, being able to work through issues. So he works with the builder if there's, if there's any kind of disagreement. They also said, Mr. Condon is light years ahead of our past building inspectors, and I don't wanna get into who those were, but, nothing but good things to say, and nothing but a much, much better environment to work and build in the township.
Any other discussion? Hearing, is there public comment? We'll open the floor for public comment.
William Bardell, 20-year resident, New Breed, 31-year union skilled tradesman. I appreciate you, Lawrence Tominello and Bill Batoni, talking eloquently about Mr. Condon. But I wish the same eloquence was used when it concerned Mr. Dean Smith. So I'm going to say about that. And someone's got to be the top official on campus. Certainly my grandmother isn't going to do it. And I'm all about a Cinderella story. So thank you.
Thank you. No, it's for the TV,
It's for the recording.
for the folks at home.
Thank you, Mr. Burkess, for giving me the opportunity to speak, members of the Township
Did you
Board.
turn it on?
I think so.
Yep,
Yeah.
I can hear.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
on.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Vyzenko. I am the building official for the city of Sterling Heights, and I've been a resident here since 1998. I have been working closely with Brent since this past winter, and I can tell you, he's got what it takes to address conflict resolution. And as a building official, you oversee building codes, you're responsible for all codes, but also ordinance. Mr. Servio, you talked about ordinance. Well, whether Brent likes it or not, he's going to be pulled into ordinance, because now you're gonna have a conflict between a code enforcement officer and a resident. You gotta find a happy medium. So yeah, he'll be pulled into it, but in a much higher caliber of it than being out in the field and writing up trash and debris or abandoned vehicles. It takes a lot to run any department. I don't care if it's a township like the size of Harrison Township or 36 square miles like Sterling Heights. You've got to have, first off, customer service. You've got to have the personality to handle conflict resolution. Construction codes change every 3 years. Whether we like it or not, they're always going to keep changing. You're never going to know every code. But one thing Brent does is he looks things up, and he can handle that. I have a lot of confidence in Brent. I like what I'm hearing out in the community, as well as what you guys have stated today. And I think that that the township, through the years, has had a reputation from the building department that has to be changed. It's a very critical turning point for the township building department, and I think Brent is the one that can absolutely handle it for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And also congratulations on your award as Building Official of the Year. So that's a pretty significant role.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're fortunate to have your support, and I appreciate your comments. Any further discussion, Board? Hearing none, I have a motion from Mr. Tominello, a support by Mr. Battanti, to promote Mr. Brent Condon to the position of Building Official and Ordinance Enforcement Officer in the GELC bargaining unit at a salary of $65,520. I didn't list the start date, I guess, on here.
You said 12/21/16.
Well, the prior arrangement is through 12/21/16, but
It's gotta be the pay date.
First
It
of the
doesn't
year.
have to be the payday.
doesn't have to be, it can be at any point. So, but the issue being, you know, whether or not we want to give him that position or that role
It's
and give
easier
him
for
the.
accounting if we do it on the pay date.
They
Actually,
said it doesn't matter,
Yeah, they
because
said it
it
doesn't matter.
changes the
That's
next
funny,
time.
they've been telling us for 12 years that it does matter.
I know, because I walked in.
Come on.
I walked in after we hired somebody, and we put it on this date, so it's easier for you. They go, well, really, it doesn't matter. And I go, oh, okay.
Well, that's
Right.
what I've been saying for 12 years.
Just
the
saying.
reason why I didn't leave it, I didn't make it 12/31/16 is because number one, there was an opportunity for us to act before the end of the year, but number two, there is, as you're approaching the end of the calendar year and people aren't here, they're doing payroll in advance. So I did set that as a payroll date, but it would seem logical to me that we would want to make that effective such that the fellow has the authority, because there are truly some authorities associated with being the building official, the signature on documentation, and so on and so forth. So, Mr. Tominello, would you accept an effective date of tomorrow?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Batanti can support?
Okay.
All right. All right, so we have a motion to promote Mr. Brent Condon to the position of Building Official and Ordinance Enforcement Officer in the GELC bargaining unit at a salary of $65,520, effective tomorrow. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board, and thank you to the residents who spoke, and to you, Mr. Condon. Next on our agenda, item F4 regarding the vacancy. So let me back up a little bit. We had a little bit of discussion about this. The proposal that I'm bringing forward is to hire a building inspector. So let's make sure that we understand what that role is or what that purpose is. As you pointed out, and as some board members have said historically, and I don't think it was Mr. Batanti, if I recall, I think it was
No, I
Mr.
said his predecessor.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, it
okay,
was
good.
Jack.
Yep, you're right, it was Jack. And I agree with that. Whether I like it or not, our building department has been in kind of a state of influx for multiple years in terms of absences, terminations, arbitrations, and really an absence since last December of a year of one individual. So the idea of bringing this individual, this hire forward, is putting us only back to the staffing level that we've historically been at. So I don't think, it didn't sound like the dispute was hiring or not hiring, but the concern was ordinance enforcement. Now, what we're saying in essence is this: if we hire someone who's only an ordinance enforcement officer, all they can do is ordinance enforcement. So when someone goes on vacation or has an illness or a disability, I do not have the ability to have that person also, for example, do inspections. The flip side is, for $1,800, I can hire someone and I can say to that person, today, I want you to go out and do ordinance enforcement. I can say that to any one of the individuals. Let's just say that we hire Mr. Jones in this position in the next 30 days. I can say to Mr. Condon, to Mr. Sternicki, or to Mr. Jones, go and do ordinance enforcement. Mr. Condon can send either one of those individuals out to do ordinance enforcement. It's a part of their assignment. But if I hire someone and they're an ordinance enforcement officer, the only thing they can do is ordinance enforcement. And if, for some reason, in a department of 3 individuals, one is absent, it puts a pretty big strain on the others. So we're not proposing another inspector because we don't want to do ordinance enforcement. We're proposing to hire someone else so that of those 3 individuals, one can focus on inspection, one can focus on inspection, and one can focus on ordinance.
I understand all of that, but the fact of the matter is, nobody likes to do the ordinance. What happened in the past was that ordinance wasn't getting done, and then, of course, when you hired Mr. Condon as the temporary, you expressed that we were saving money because you didn't replace the building official. So you were one person short, as you just pointed out.
Correct.
So ordinance has been lacking for over a year.
No question.
Very little ordinance. So at the very least, what I'd like to see is hire an ordinance officer only and let them catch up on ordinance and then bring it back to the board to go and send them for training to become a inspector at that point.
But they might, the person who would, just from experience, the person that, if we put out an ordinance enforcement job, we're gonna get somebody that sat at a desk in some place and has never worked in construction or meet the requirements to apply for a building inspector position. So.
Mr. Condon didn't have that either.
Yeah, he did. He came from,
But Mr. Condon he was a journeyman, you know, he had all this stuff where he could apply to the state and say, yep, I meet every single thing to be a building inspector. When we've put out for a job posting for, just ordinance enforcement with no requirement to meet the requirements under the construction code, we get somebody who was an office person who did ordinance every now and then, and they have no idea anything about construction, but they want to get paid more and work in an office in a municipality. So they would never meet the requirements to, be a building official should we want to take advantage of that. So that's just what we've seen on the employment side when we put that kind of job opening out. When we put it out for a building official,
Building
inspector, we do get some people who say, "Hey, I don't want to do the ordinance," and we've said, "Well, we're not going to hire you." You know, what I mean, that's just sitting in the interviews. That's what we've made it very clear to people. Your primary focus is this, and I think for $1,800, and it's give or take.
Actually, it's a little more than that, isn't it? Because you have training. You send these people to Lansing at least a couple
oh,
times a year.
yeah, well, it's
So-
certainly not just $1,800, there's FICA on there, but the point is,
But it-
I didn't mean to deceive you, the salary difference is roughly
I
$1,800.
mean, yeah, the salary's
But even if I said it's
but there's
$2,500,
training.
even if I said it's $2,500 a year difference, let's say I have the building official and a building inspector, and that's it. And let's say they get a bare minimum of 2 weeks of vacation each. It's more than that, but let's say 2 weeks. That's 4 weeks, 40 hours. I need to backfill that time throughout the course of the year because they like to take their vacation in the summer. When vacation, when we're busy with construction. So let's say we have to backfill. Let's say we have to backfill for that entire time. We usually pay about $25 an hour, give or take. That's 160 hours, $25 an hour. You're talking $4,000 at a bare minimum to backfill those positions. For $1,800, I'm saving money having the ordinance enforcement officer have the skill set and the license to be able to do those inspections.
Mr. Supervisor, I think, I understand Mr. Servo's point. I talk to a lot of people in the community. I have. I couldn't say that before, but certain circumstances that occurred over the summer allow me to say that I talked to a lot of people.
You've been
And-
saved from death by screen doors numerous times.
That's a long story, but I can explain it to you later. Yes, that's correct. I held those doors shut, trust me. But I do agree that for the most part, people seem satisfied with the community, but one thing I would agree with is there was a concern over lack of ordinance enforcement.
Correct.
But I also like the point about the flexibility of the individual. I do. And I think that we, in the interviewing process, as you said, we make it clear, and then we hold Mr. Condon accountable for making sure the job gets done.
Correct.
I will make it your responsibility, sir, to make sure that those folks, if they're instructed to do ordinance, they do it. So I like the flexibility, and I'd like to hold management accountable.
And I just, I think that's important, but I think also, as ordinance enforcement, we as a board at some point need to make some sort of, policy issue where we decide what level of ordinance
Right,
officer
right.
enforcement we want to see. I can go down one street and they say, this is good. I can go down another street and they say, that's not good at all. That's terrible. You know what I mean? So there's, part of that when someone says, we need more ordinance enforcement, they might have moved here from Grosse Pointe. It's a little different. And then I have people that moved from the UP and they say, man, you guys are strict.
Right.
So, we need to take that all with a grain of salt and decide how we're going to enforce the
Good point.
ordinances across the township, what level we truly want to see.
There's some simple when
There's
people
low-hanging
call us,
fruit.
there's some,
Oh, yeah.
there's some pretty low hanging fruit that I don't think anybody would say that doesn't need to be enforced.
Yeah,
Right.
and,
I won't get into all those items.
No.
but, you know.
and if we talk about ordinance enforcement and blight, we can talk about two things. One is there was a time when it became, well, maybe not overwhelming, but if people are walking away from homes, blight's just more prevalent. I mean, there's just, weed cutting and basic maintenance. we've certainly seen an improvement in the housing market, and with that, we've seen homes that were vacant that are now occupied, that have been fixed up, and the private sector has done that. But admittedly, this summer, being one person short, the good news is, the budgetary figure of where we thought we'd be in the building department, we're in better shape by December than we thought we would have been. We saved some money. We were obviously short a person, but with that came some sacrifices, and ordinance enforcement was one of them. Mr. Condon, in my opinion, has been the best at ordinance enforcement that I've seen in the 6 years that I've been here. He's done the best job at ordinance enforcement. With that in mind, I feel confident that if I give him 2 individuals to manage to get the work done, I'm confident that he'll be able to do a better job of that. But I think, just like you as a tradesman, I think that I want to make sure that I give him the tools to be able to do the work that he needs done. And I believe that getting him a slightly better tool in the form of an inspector is a small price to pay to be able to avoid unforeseen circumstances in a really relatively very small department, considering, only 3 individuals. But I respect your position. We could talk about it some more, or maybe make a motion.
Make a motion to authorize the supervisor to post advertise an interview for the position of building inspector, with a recommendation to come back before the board of trustees.
All right, is there support?
Well, first off, the motion's wrong. You can't say building inspector, you wanna put building inspector, ordinance
/ ordinance
officer.
officer.
Well, I'm just,
Officer, if that's what you're doing, right, if you just,
Well,
but there's
the
a
position within the
there's
union,
a
there's a
official
title.
title within the contract that says building inspector. I'd be happy to say, for the position of
I just
building.
don't want anybody to be misinformed.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm not advertising for anything other than building inspector. It does me no good
Okay.
to go through the process of interviewing someone without informing them of what the circumstances are, only to have them say, well, I don't want this job, and leave. But it is a specific title. So I
Well, I
can't say
think
a
in our-
building inspector, ordinance enforcement officer. There is
Well,
no such
I
title.
think when you put it out there to the MML or whatever, I think you need to make it clear that we're
Yeah, and I
looking
believe-
we can
for
talk
a
about
I
that.
believe Mr.
ordinance
no,
officer first and a building
Well,
inspector
could
second.
the, could the motion, may I ask a
I'm
question?
sorry, and
No, you're
first
making
off,
a
we
motion.
have a motion hanging out
Right.
without a second.
Right.
We're
Correct,
sort of off
right.
course
I'll
here.
second it so we can.
Okay, good.
And I would just say, just to Mr. York's point, when we put this position out last time, Mr. Dimchek, when he put the posting together, there is specific wording within the job description of a building inspector that speaks to the court enforcement requirement. When you're putting the job notice together, you sort of parse what you put in there. He made sure that was like the first thing in the posting. He said there will be an emphasis on, the focus of the position is ordinance enforcement, blah, 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 blah.
That's fine, I just don't
So-
wanna be going down this road where
Yeah.
a year from now or 2 years from now, somebody says, well, the board made a motion that we were hiring a building inspector, not an ordinance officer.
Well, I don't want to go in a position in 2 months when I'm interviewing somebody and goes, I have no idea this was for ordinance enforcement.
Well, that's
So-
my point.
No, I know,
That's
I-
exactly my
Can I,
point.
can I ask a question? Could we make a motion? So a motion's been made?
And
sir.
seconded.
So could the motion be amended to say job responsibilities to include?
It already says that. The job description for building inspector says
Within the
those
contract.
responsibilities are
I
included.
understood that, but why couldn't it say that in the motion? What's preventing us from saying that in the motion, to Mr. York's point?
I would just, I
It's-
feel like
it's
I'm being
re-
verbose
why-
for no purpose.
Yeah.
I'm
You've been
fine with saying
verbose
building inspector,
plenty
I'm
of
just saying
times.
when
Yeah.
you post it, make sure that people know that.
That's my whole
Because-
point. That's what
because
we've done.
people- Because people, they think, oh, I'm a building inspector, they put in a resume, and it wastes everybody's time when, the guy just wants to be a building inspector.
My recommendation, verbosity notwithstanding, is that we amend the motion to say job responsibilities to include.
Yeah, and my,
If that's the only
my
thing that
request was that we don't do that. I've gone through this process. This will be the 3rd position that I've hired for this, and the last 2 I hired are still here. So I was able to navigate this supposed challenge successfully because both of the individuals that I hired with this literally just by changing the words, they're still here. So I feel confident I can get this done. As HR, I've done this before. This is sufficient for me. That's all I could say.
So I will say, going down this path twice now, this is now my 3rd time. We still have the same, like I said, Mr. Condon was hired as an ordinance officer. We had ordinance for a while. Then it was, we gravitate over to the building inspector. That's what's happened now, not one, twice. Now we're going down the path the 3rd time. I will assure you, we're not going down the path, and I will say this. I'm 100% confident that Mr. Condon's gonna make sure that that ordinance gets done,
I am too.
okay? But I
his
just
feet
feel
are
like,
gonna get
I just feel
scorched.
like, you know, I've done this once, twice, and now I'm on the third time here.
I mean,
and-
the issue was, we hired somebody who was good, they left, you know, you had somebody move up, you know, and then it happened, you know, and then it happened again. That's, you know, when there's a position that opens, you know, part of having an organization that makes an attractive workplace is having places for advancement for people, and you can't fault somebody for taking a different position.
Well, what happens, like Mr. Servil said, it's very simple. You have, nobody wants to go do ordinance. If you're a building inspector, last thing you wanna do is go around and cite people because they have, you know, dilapidated cars in their driveway or whatever the ordinance is. You wanna go to the building inspector, it's fun, you go out there, you inspect, you do your stuff, you're done, you know? The ordinance part of the job is, people don't like that, we know that from the interviews. The guys, some of the guys don't, I have to do ordinance, oh no, I'm done. We had some of those guys.
I haven't interviewed one yet, but I might have missed out on them, so. All right. If it's okay with the board, we'll open the floor for public comment.
William Barrell, 20-year resident. We got a real problem with these guys. They're inspectors, right? So if you see a Winnebago on the front lawn with weeds growing up it, why wouldn't you take your company phone, take a picture of it, and then walk up to the address, take a picture of the address, walk back, and hit the button, and hit the button, and then it goes to your paperwork down at your office. We got guys parking. We got flatbeds on front lawns. I mean, God, you couldn't believe it. Can't these inspectors, do they have the depth to see this stuff? You know, if a gutter's falling off a house, you can't see that. You can't see. Can they see this stuff? Somebody, you call it in and then you go, oh, well, you're hiding behind a telephone. Come down and give your mother's maiden name. Well, not really, but come down and fill out paperwork. Okay, can these inspectors, do they have the depth to see that the gutter's falling off the house? There's a Winnebago parked on a front lawn with weeds growing up. There's a car parked on the front lawn, not just to have a party. It's not a bachelor party. The car's been sitting on the front lawn for 3 years. Can we see this? Can we take a picture of it? Or does someone have to call it in and hide behind a phone and then get busted out at a board meeting for hiding behind a phone because they didn't give their mother's maiden name on the paperwork? So do we have the depth? Is the depth on the bench to see something that's jacked up? Okay? There's a big problem with it. So can we have this guy be an ordinance official and an inspector too? I mean, gee whiz, if the guy's an inspector and he's a tradesman, he should see if a gutter's falling off a house or, come on, you can't park a Winnebago and a flatbed on your front lawn, not just overnight or something. I mean, it's, you know, there for 3 years. Come on, you can't have a boat on your front lawn with a tattered thing flying off it. And I mean, come on. Do these inspectors see this? Can they see? Do they got rose-colored glasses on? I mean, gee whiz. Just bing it with your phone, take a picture, step back, you take a picture of it, you take a picture of the address, and away you go. It's not that hard. You got the proof, you got the date and the time on your phone. I mean, golly, it's 2016, man. Let's get with it, man. Thank you. I've approved this message.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mike Vizenko again. First off, I'd like to express my thoughts on the shared utilize the inspector/enforcement officer. It's a great use of resources. Coming from past experiences, I've done it to all my inspectors. My plumbing inspectors were doing code enforcement. My mechanical, my electrical. They were all doing code enforcement when we needed them. Now we've gotten so busy, I've backed that off and brought in a whole different division. But having an extra inspector that's recognized at the state as a building inspector that meets the Act 54 that the state approves gives the department much more flexibility in the event that maybe Brent's gone and maybe Steve had to call in because he had an emergency. At least those footings are getting inspected, that building's getting inspected, and projects keep moving forward. I think the end goal is we wanna see economic development moving in a forward motion. And for that $50 a week, maybe, if that's what it is, that's a pretty good, pretty good use of resources, in my opinion, so. I support the idea, and I think, Adam, you made it perfectly clear to bring in a subcontractor as an inspector and a part-time, it's gonna wind up costing the township more money. So, I like the idea, thanks.
Thank you.
You know, since we're here talking about this.
Hold on a minute. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Mr. York?
You know, I know we went through the campaign and everybody was knocking on doors, and besides the police issue where we probably need to get some more policing done, I know that everybody heard that comment. The other item was the ordinance. That was, 1 and 2 was either police ordinance, one or the other.
My number one
But-
was school taxes, but
Well, that's not our issue, but shouldn't have voted yes 10 years ago on the 10-year bond that's now 30 years, but that's for another day. But that being said, the suggestion that came over and over was, I think we need to allow people to be able to report ordinance violations anonymously. This policy that we have that someone has to come down here and put their name on something, and the name always somehow gets out to the neighbor who complained. We try and keep it secret, but sometimes it gets out. I think we need to have some type of anonymous ordinance complaint line, if you will, where people can, put in a complaint.
All right.
My only comment would be, I understand everything that was said here about the advantages of having the inspector. After all, I'm a 40-year builder, retired. I understand the process. But like Mr. York has stated, it didn't get done in the past, even when we had 3 people. So, I just want to see it getting done. It's not the money as much as it is the fact that the work wasn't performed.
Are you gonna get it done?
It's
Mr.
nasty
Condon?
work.
Huh? I don't have a problem doing this, and I voted yes on this item, right? You vote yes, all this stuff sounds good, but sometimes sounds good in practice, it doesn't quite turn out that way.
Well, it seems like we beat this one up pretty good. Is there further comment, maybe anything new, or if not? We've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to authorize the supervisor to post, advertise, and interview for the position of building inspector with a recommendation to come back before the Board of Trustees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next is item F5. Board members, in 2013, we were successful in getting a coastal zone management grant to create a waterfront redevelopment plan. That led to the formation of our Downtown Development Authority. This year, the DDA Board, with help from Mrs. Amanda Oparka, was successful in getting another coastal zone management grant to develop a zoning overlay for the district, along with a complete streets design and a developer's guide. The next round of coastal zone management grants have been announced and are available. One of the targeted projects on the spillway, as a part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative monies, was the installation of fishing piers. Currently, the folks that fish along the spillway basically just walk along the shoreline, and it leads to a certain amount of erosion, which doesn't necessarily always help water quality and so forth. This current round of coastal zone management grants will fund the construction, or would be allowed to fund the construction of an ADA compliant fishing pier and kayak launch. The maximum amount of the grant is $100,000, which would then come with an additional $100,000 in match. We are in discussion with other agencies to assist with the match. The grant application requires that one municipality or agency be the sponsoring agency, but other sources of funding are accepted. The application is due in a matter of days. It's later this month. I'm asking for the Board of Trustees to pass a resolution supporting this grant. Board members, at this point, I want to make it clear that I am not asking this board to match $100,000 grant with $100,000. You might say to yourself, well, gee whiz, it sure looks like that, because the resolution that you're asking us to approve says we'll get $100,000 and we'll match it with $100,000. I will tell you that if we are successful in getting this grant, and I have no assistance from any other agencies, I'll make a motion, or I'll bring forward a recommendation that a motion be made to refuse the grant. Having said that, coastal zone management grant dollars ultimately stem from NOAA, and other grant dollars can be used as a part of the match, number one. Number two, there are foundations and other grant sources that specifically look for opportunities to support or sponsor funding for ADA compliant recreational outdoor projects. This particular location near the Tucker Senior Center is unique in the sense that the parking lot is at grade. The path that takes you from the parking lot to the edge of the spillway is at the appropriate grade or pitch such that it's ADA compliant. Once you get to the edge of the spillway, if we were able to construct a path that were to go down one side of the bank, turn 90 degrees perhaps, turn and come back the other way, land at a fishing pier that's ADA compliant, and then allow for an additional path to go down to a kayak launch, from a grant perspective, the points that would be awarded to that application would be very high. And so this project we could apply for grants from other sources. In addition, folks at the county level, at the Public Works Office, may very well have an interest, since there is a lot of focus on the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative dollars as a part of the Clinton River area of concern that have been spent on the spillway. In order for us to apply for this grant, we have to pass a resolution stating that in essence, we are in support of this project. It does not bind us to accept the grant if the grant is awarded. So if we happen to get this opportunity, and I don't have alternative funding to match this, I wouldn't ask the board to even participate in this process. But I believe that this is from conversation with the folks at the DEQ that oversee the coastal zone management project, I think this has a high likelihood of success. If we get the grant and nobody else wants to participate, and we're the only guys there waving the flag, we can say, you know what, we just can't afford it at this time, and we've got to decline the grant. But I feel confident that by October of next year, we could find some other agencies that would be willing to participate, as well as possible foundations and the like.
There's no other place like that down very close.
Correct.
Here,
Right.
it would be you'd have to go way upriver, wouldn't you?
Well, the only one, they're putting one in MacArthur Park in Mount Clemens.
kayak.
For
Okay.
kayaking, not a 88 fishing structure.
I'm just trying to,
but-
go up the
But one of the
spillway
things,
there.
one of the things that they talked about with that project is the way they're coming up with the match portion of the dollars. Is they're doing a crowdfunding, like a Kickstarter, to raise the $60,000 match for that program. So, I mean, even if we want to get creative, that's something we could look at too.
Right. The thing here is that this kind of comes up a little quick. They released it, we looked at it, we've done some research. I've talked to Mr. Newmer, we've worked with the folks at the Clinton River Watershed Council. Mrs. Oparka has agreed to take on the application for this. We do have support and resolutions from other agencies. But at this point, if the township doesn't sponsor this, I can't apply for the grant.
Make a motion that we
Yeah.
approve the resolution.
All right.
Support, I mean to cut you off. but
No,
it's
that's okay.
spin it
I'm
around.
looking for,
Right,
look,
I'm
I'm seeing
looking
blank
some-
faces.
I think it's
I'm
a
not
good
seeing it.
opportunity,
Yeah.
and let's just look how it pans out.
Sure.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, it's a good opportunity, we may, this may
My
work
only
out.
question would be awarded to, I understand the grant is only for 100,000 maximum, so 200,
100,000 grant plus 100,000 match.
right, so is it practical to do what you described for $200,000?
Well, we've looked at different construction methods, and I know that we've corresponded with Mr. Newmer. We believe that it is.
Okay,
Look, I've always
I
been
didn't
one,
see who seconded it, though. I'm
I-
sorry.
Mr.
Mr.
Tominelli.
Mr. Tominelli, sorry.
I've always been one for these infrastructure improvements, so
let's take advantage
I'm in.
of
I mean, even if it
Take
ends up
advantage of
costing
it.
us 50,000, you know, I think the residents like to see something. When you spend $50,000 and, hey, we got a new fishing pier and we got a nice, people like to see that. I think that's,
Mr. Badkins? would you-
Yeah, on the resolution, the fifth,
That's right.
whereas, it gives the appearance that it's $200.
Where's
The
that?
total project cost is
Oh, there's
estimated.
a zero missing.
Yeah, there's
So
a
I
zero.
would
in
just,
Catch.
uh,
Your accounting background caught that.
there was I thought there was another one that said $100 too.
No, it's 10,000 in
Yeah.
in-kind match, in-kind
Oh,
services. 10,000 in in-kind services, for example, could be, earth moving on the part of the water and sewer department. So we can do in-kind services at various levels.
What they charge us, we're better off outsourcing.
So it
Well-
says to approve the attached resolution, so will that be modified to,
It's
Yeah.
a minor typographical
okay,
error, it's
okay.
not.
Yep, yeah. So.
Comments?
Yep,
So, in the past, I've talked about us having some sort of listing of outstanding projects. And what I'd like to see us do, this sounds like a good idea to apply for. And I'm glad that you clarified it, Mr. Supervisor, about leaving the decision as to whether or not we actually accept it to further financial considerations. But even prior to doing that, I'd like to see us create a list of what is looming out there. Like, what do we, what I'd like to be able to do is compare this with other potential expenses. I know that we all, and there are things that we don't know about or that we missed that are, and I'd just like to see a list. So that when we talk about this, we say we know we have these other things going on. And I know it wouldn't be hard to do that. So my position would be, is that before I would vote on the financial decision, I'd like to see that compiled. Sure. And I'm glad to hear that we're not making a commitment on the financial side just yet, so.
any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello to approve the attached resolution approving submission of a coastal zone management grant application for an ADA compliant fishing pier and kayak launch on the spillway in our Downtown Development Authority district. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Batkins?
yes?
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Servil?
Yes,
Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Verkowski?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Motion carries. Now we'll open the floor for public comment. Comments can be about anything. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes in length.
William Bardell, 20-year resident. I want to first talk about this Dean Smith crisis. I appreciate Mr. Batkins showing the moxie to stick up for Dean Smith. You are the new kid on the block here on the board, and I appreciate you showing the moxie to stand with Mr. Servio and Mr. York on this. I wasn't surprised by Mr. Bill Battani, you going along with Adam and Ken on throwing Dean Smith under the bus. But I was surprised with you, Larry Tominello, because no matter what happens on this board, I always looked up to you and I considered you neutral. And I had great, great respect for you in the past. I thought no matter what happened, you were going to be a level-headed guy, and you indeed did throw Dean Smith under the bus in this instance. I was looking to you, and it didn't happen. So enough about that. But I want to thank you, Mr. Batkins, for your moxie on this one. And I want to thank you, Mr. Servio, and you, Mr. York, for sticking up for Dean Smith. This problem with the senior center is something, this no-bid contract thing with Wade Trim. This is the problem that you have when you have one favorite, and Ken, you talk a lot about these relationships. And again, we talk about relationships. This is what happens when you don't put jobs out for bid. And that means your general contractor, that means your overseer, that's across the board. Competition makes for better products and services. And this is what you have over and over and over again. This is what you got when the Huron Metro Park Authority got a 300% raise for cutting their own lawn. that Harrison Township and Clinton Township agreed with. Now, how do they maintain the center island? Depends how many times I call. I'm not gonna call about the garbage over there under the overpass. And, you know, I may be too old to do all their work for them in the future. I don't know. I may get too old to clean all the ditches that they don't clean. I don't know. But this is what you get when you don't put stuff out for bid. This is what you get. And it's going to happen over and over and over again. On this agenda item, it said update on senior center. It didn't say cost overrun on the agenda. Because if it did, there would have been a lot more people here tonight. With that being said, I'd like everybody to also check out Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook. And I want to wish all the residents and board members a safe and happy Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Stay safe, pace yourself, you'll get through this. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. I wanted to come here for a couple of reasons tonight. First off, I was a little anxious to see what the final verdict would be, and if it went as I hoped it would, I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm very thankful and appreciative of this job opportunity, and I thoroughly enjoy coming to work, and I'm proud to say I'm a part of the Harrison Township Building Department. So, that's it.
Thank you.
It's not 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. Any comments, board members?
I just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and stay safe through the holidays.
And I think, I suppose each of us, I mean, if there's something else to say, but I guess maybe on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the employees, I think we'll wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year instead of
you,
going
Mr.
around and saying the
Supervisor.
same thing. Is
That-
there something else?
We should probably mention when we're closed, which I don't, when does that start? The 23rd?
We're closed the 23rd through the 2nd.
Township offices will be closed December 23rd through January 2nd, opening on the 3rd.
Correct. And
But-
just,
so-
is
so
there
I
a
would-
question?
I'll just go.
I'm sorry, I was gonna ask you, is there, we've got a couple phone calls from people who are curious whether or not, there's a place they can pay their tax bill during that gap prior to the end of the year.
Well, like always, they can pay that with their bill and a check at the Chase Bank on Crocker Boulevard only.
Chase?
Only
Chase?
during that time, and I
There's no
posted it.
chase on
You mean
Crocker.
on Harper?
On Harper,
Okay.
I'm sorry, Harper. On Harper, between the 23rd and the 2nd only, and you must have your bill and a check.
So, just
And I
just
posted
north
that
of,
on the
north of
doors.
16 on
Yes, and I
Harper.
posted it on the doors.
Okay. What about if they put it in
And
the
I've had,
Dropbox?
if you put it in the Dropbox, you know, the IRS takes it as it's December 31st. It'll get processed at some point when we get back the 3rd, 4th, depending on how much stacks of stuff we have. It sometimes takes us
5th, 6th.
a couple days to.
Takes some time to process it, but you consider it as having been paid in 2016.
Right, so does the IRS.
No,
Yeah.
that's good, I'm just saying, so that's an option that folks have also.
Yep, they certainly could put it in the Dropbox.
Good. All right,
And those checks won't get cashed until the 5th or 6th or 7th,
yeah.
just so you know.
All right, if nothing else, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
For support.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, board members.
Was that Mr. York that made that motion?
Yeah, and Mr. Badkin.